Salutations, people of the internet, welcome to the database, and welcome to the final installment of this year's Summer of Kirby Marathon. We covered a lot of Kirby games this year, and that's a hell of a feat to accomplish. What a fitting way to cap off this marathon by looking at the final act of Kirby's Dark Matter Trilogy. And yes, that means I do have a way to capture footage on my Wii. The year was 2000. Everyone was scared of Y2K. WWE hosted their best calendar year aside from their WrestleMania. WCW slowly became a sinking ship, and Sony released their best-selling home console of all time, the PlayStation 2. And while Sega ended up discontinuing their last home console, the Dreamcast, Nintendo was preparing for their next home console set to be released in 2001. But that doesn't mean Nintendo stopped making games for their current, later soon-to-be previous generation of their home console, the Nintendo 64. The N64 has seen amazing exclusives released, from Perfect Dark to the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, not to mention Banjo-Kazooie got their own sequel as well that year. For WWF Attitude Era fans, they were gifted with WWF No Mercy, one of the best wrestling video games of all time, and for the topic of this video, we're gifted with a unique Kirby experience titled Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards. Let's talk about it. Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards marks the final game directed by Shinichi Shimomura, the person who worked behind Kirby's Dream Land 2 and 3. And seeing that Kirby 64 shared the same director as those games, you can see some of the elements from those two games implemented in 64. Example here, the return of dark matter and its forces. This time around, dark matter takes over a planet called Ripple Star, who are after the all-powerful crystal, protected by inhabited fairies. The queen of Ripple Star asks Ribbon to take the crystal and find a safe place to hide it. However, the dark matter forces are on her tail as she escapes, causing dark matter to shatter the crystal into pieces across different planets. Ribbon crash lands onto Popstar and is spotted by Kirby. Ribbon explains to Kirby that dark matter is after the crystal shards, and realizing dark matter is the one behind all this helps Ribbon in finding the shards across several planets. Later within Popstar, Kirby and Ribbon manage to recruit a Waddle Dee, no relation, Adeline, also no relation, and King Dedede in their planet hopping adventure. Yep, for the first time in the Kirby series, King Dedede joins the hero team. Yeah, he does show signs of his rival between him and Kirby when we first see the king, but for most of the time in this adventure, he's a good guy to the end. In this game, there are a total of 74 crystal shards. While boss fights typically give you 1 crystal shard per world, you'll find most of them across normal 2.5 like stages. Yes, that's the unique part of Kirby 64. While the game looks like it could be a 3D Kirby game, it's not, as this adventure still plays like a 2D Kirby game. The 3D aspect of it all comes down to the character models and the landscape you traverse through. And while it's a cool visual to look at, it does feel disappointing, especially for the late N64 game that saw many of its games transitioning to a 3D landscape, mainly Mario 64 years ago. Plus, the game itself feels flatter and more linear than ever with this direction, compared to the variety of platforming levels we've gotten beforehand. As for the end of the story, woof. And I thought the true ending for Dreamland 3 was dark. So after reaching Ripple Star, their queen is possessed by dark matter, as Kirby is off to face against Miracle Matter, a cool concept for a boss, where you can only damage is based on the same copyability it's currently using. Afterwards, you get this bad ending if you don't collect all 74 shards, where Kirby and his friends fly back home with the queen giving off this evil look, clearly still possessed by dark matter. However, if you do manage to collect all 74 shards before facing off Miracle Matter, you get the true ending where the crystal uses its power to repel dark matter out of the queen, and Kirby and his friends are set off to the final level of the game, Dark Star. With the help of Ribbon and the crystal by Kirby's side, they come across the being behind the dark matter forces in the game, Zero 2, an energetic beast based off the original Zero from Dreamland 3. After shooting his thorny booty a bunch of times, all of dark matter's forces have finally vanished, and Kirby and his friends are rewarded with gold medals for their efforts, ending Kirby 64, The Crystal Shard, and the end of the Dark Matter Trilogy. So the gameplay for Kirby 64 plays similar to the previous Dreamland games, where each copy ability has only one type of command, along with having a very small copy ability count to boot. Maybe even smaller than Dreamland games too, as there are only 7 copy abilities now in this game, minus the Ribbon Crystal ability that is exclusive to the final boss. However, to make up for the small amount of copy abilities, introduce a new, unique copy ability system that is only seen in this game and Kirby Squeak Squad, kinda. Copy ability combinations. Alongside the 7 base copy abilities you can get from normal enemies, there are a total of 28 different combinations for players to experiment with. To do so, if a player already has a copy ability on standby, press a button to turn your ability into a star piece, and toss that ability into another enemy that has a copy ability. Afterwards, Kirby can inhale them as he's gifted with an array of copy combo outputs depending on the abilities combined. Take this combo for example, where you mix 2 burning abilities together, and you can turn Kirby into this Firebird. Perfect for horizontal travel, and good for taking down enemies along the way. Or this Spark and Cutter combo that grants you this double-edged lightsaber that is perfect for this boss fight in Shiver Star. Speaking of Shiver Star, you probably heard about this from other channels, but did you know? When you're on the level select screen and reach Shiver Star, and look closely and carefully at it, why does it look like Earth frozen over? Does that mean we've died in the Kirby universe? How did Ado and Adeline come to Popstar? You see this too, right? The planet has one moon like our Earth. Its continental shape is like our own. When you start this stage, it's a standard ice level, but then you enter this somehow working factory. It is a commentary on our world's industrialization. Well, whatever. With these copy ability combos, you can break bosses easily, and to change the pace of each fight that comes in different phases. Some boss fights have Kirby run into a circle like the first 2 fights, while some of the boss phases are auto-scroll like Arco and HR Robot. Mid-level bosses, however, are the most disappointing here, as they're just larger variants of the normal enemies you come across, and like I said, they go down easy with copy abilities. So there are 74 crystals to 100% complete the game, and some of them can be easiest to find and out in the open in places if you know your platformer's handbook, but some of them are a pain to get to. So I already talked about the process of copy ability combinations, right? Well, some of those shards are locked behind color-coded combinations, and if you don't have the right combo within the stage you're playing, most of the time you need to go to a different level that has the right copy abilities you need, and to restart the level that has the shard from the beginning. That's not padding, that's just monotonous. Plus, even if you use an online guide early on, if you plan on not doing that, you don't know what copy ability combo you need prior, so once you're in the area that requires as such, it's not fun to go back and get what you need. The worst part about backtracking old stages to get the right abilities is that only certain stages consist of some enemies with copy abilities, meaning that not all stages host all the 7 copy abilities, which I guess benefits the game experience based on the player's experimentation. Like I said, there are good combos that are useful for Kirby's offense and movement options. I already mentioned the lightsaber and the Firebird, but there is also this burn bomb combo that I like, where Kirby turns into a firecracker and has awesome range. There is a stone cutter combo that turns Kirby into stone versions of his animal friends from Dreamlands 2 and 3, though not all of them are that useful, and the only form that is useful in the game was the pitch form that I often use. Don't get me started on how the stone bomb combo confuses me. So this is another ability required for a shard, right? Here's what the game doesn't tell you. When you throw this dynamite, it explodes in a blast radius so large it even hurts Kirby. What you're supposed to do is hold down on the controller and put Kirby in a hard hat to protect himself. This is dumb. So yeah, copy abilities in this game are a hit and miss depending on your copy combination. You might like some of the copy combos that I do, but hey, more power to you. But how does Kirby control in this time around? Well, I don't know if it's just me, but Kirby seems to be moving a bit slower than the main games that were released previously. Granted, in the previous 2 games Shinichi Shimomura directed, it's best to take your time in those games levels because you can lose your copy ability in one hit. Thankfully, in Kirby 64, that doesn't happen. Swimming, on the other hand, It's not impressive. They also limited Kirby's floating ability in this game, the first game to do so, and they wouldn't do this again until Kirby and the Forgotten Land in 2022. Seeing as I fully completed that game last year, I understand this was done not to break the game's levels, but for Forgotten Land's case, I can totally understand. In that game, you're traversing through a 3D landscape, and the developers don't want you to break stages and reach to the end of the goal by floating. Here, I argue it makes no sense to limit this ability in Kirby 64, because a lot of the levels in the game are flat, with the occasional vertical platforming here and there. Speaking of, let's get into the levels now. With the exception of the final stage, Dark Star, there are 6 levels in Kirby 64. Each level consists of between 4 to 5 stages. In the stage selection screen, there's a tab that tells you how many crystal shards are in that stage. Most stages consist of up to 3 shards, and each of the stages in these levels seem to tell a narrative as you progress, with the environment around you having slight to major changes in each of them. I mentioned the progression of Shiver Star earlier, where it starts off as an ice level and ends in a factory setting. You see this in other stages too. In Pop Star, you start off in the grasslands and forests, ending at King Dedede's castle, with each stage in that level sees you in a mid-boss fight against your recruited allies. Rockstar, the second level, seems like a desert stage, but then you enter this high-tech pyramid and face off against this high-tech boss. Neostar, the 4th level, starts off within the forest setting and ends with a boss fight against a lava monster in this volcanic setting. All the levels and stages in this game is filled with this kind of stage narrative progression, and it's kind of something that will be carried over in future Kirby games. Yeah, Kirby Dream Land 3 did this first as well, though some of the landmarks in some of those stages can feel identical in my experience. Each stage ends with a picnic bonus game where Kirby can pick up either stars that grant Kirby an extra life if you collect enough, health items from the food and Maxim tomatoes, and these specially marked cards that gift you bios of different types of enemies featured in the game. These cards are randomized, and you won't be able to tell what kind of cards you get until you navigate to the enemy bio section of the game. Thankfully, these cards don't impact your 100% completion, but can you imagine the headache of getting all of them? Jeez. Speaking of the enemy bio section, there's also where you get to watch cutscenes from the game's story, as well as 3 sub-minigames for a multiplayer experience. There's a 100-yard hop, where you press either A or B to hop across obstacles to the finish line, Bumper Crop Bump, where you can catch falling fruit and, well, bump other players, and finally, the 1 minigame that can also be played on Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, Checkerboard Chase, where you smash platforms to cause them to fall, and the objective of the game is to make your opponents fall and be the last player standing. It's also in these sub-games where you can play as DDD, Waddle Dee, and Adeline, though they all play the same and are just cosmetic. Hey, at least it supports up to 4 players and has difficulty options. My final grade for Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards is a B-. It's an alright, though short adventure for the Nintendo 64, and a very experimental one at that. While the game is short, the stage environment makes up for it for such a beautiful landscapes on Nintendo 64. Heck, the cutscenes run at 60 frames per second. But trust me, it's amazing to see an N64 game run at 60 frames per second. I love experimenting with different combinations of these 7 copy abilities. And if I were to try and recommend this game to anyone, all I had to do was mention this copyability combination feature as a selling point, and I can guarantee that people will check this game out immediately afterwards. There is some modern method of playing this on the N64 Switch Online service, but I'm not paying $50 for a small ass expansion pack, so I was happy to play this on my Wii Virtual Console. The process of getting all crystals can get a bit tedious with a lot of backtracking, getting the correct copyability combination from other stages, but at least that show you what kind of color copy abilities you need, seeing as each of the 7 abilities are also color coded. though I feel like the collecting process feels pretty cheap, especially when you have those shards that are wide open or after a mid-boss fight. But I guess that's just me. And the final bosses, Miracle Star and Zero 2, are probably the darkest bosses in the Kirby franchise I covered so far. Still makes me wonder how this game is rated E for everyone, though it would feel weird to see a Kirby game rated T for teen. Yeah, an adorable pink marshmallow is only for angsty teenagers. Wow, I covered a lot of Kirby this summer, and I feel pretty good at how much I've covered this year. Yeah, I know I uploaded a Sonic video in the middle of the marathon, but that's because the game came out recently and I needed to cover it as soon as possible. And these Kirby videos help me keep my channel relevant, and all thanks to the consistent uploading schedule that gives me enough time to capture video footage, write a script, and video edit. I guess if I were to do another Summer of Kirby marathon, the next game I could look at is Kirby and the Amazing Mirror on the Game Boy Advance, maybe Squeak's Code on the DS. I still want to discuss about Return to Dreamland DX sometime this year, but who knows. I like to change topics every summer, but I don't mind repeating the same topics next summer. For now, I'm Christopher James, and I'll see you next time.
Muffin is a tabby, Buddy is a retriever, and Kirby is, well, Kirby is just Kirby.
Kirby's back with amazing new attack combinations in Kirby 64.